In a previous video, we talked about post-quantum algorithms. And the problem that we're trying to solve with post-quantum algorithms is what do we do with the fact that quantum computers are coming in about a decade? And they will be able to break all the public key algorithms that we're using today because they can run Shor's algorithm that can factor large integers very, very fast. Instead of taking the lifetime of the universe to break an RSA key in the key sizes that we use today, it will take just a few seconds with a quantum computer of appropriate complexity that can run Shor's algorithm. And so this is causing a bit of a crisis for cryptographers. And the way we talked about in our previous video was to come up with new algorithms that are unrelated to factoring and to replace all the currently existing public key algorithms with new ones that are based on math problems, as I said, unrelated to factoring. But there is another approach that has been proposed by the physics community many years ago, and that is quantum key distribution, or it's also called quantum cryptography. Now today, I'd like to say something about the limitations of this technology, to talk about its applicability to solving the problem. I'm not going to go into much detail about how it works because I'm not here to promote it, and that would be a much longer video. I will say just a little bit about how it works, but after that I want to talk about how we could use it in the real world and how it compares with using post-quantum algorithms instead. So with quantum key distribution, you're pretty much limited to using fiber optic cables, because you have to send photons through these fiber optic cables, and you send pairs of photons that are generated together, and they have this sort of quantum entanglement, and that is each of the two photons determines the state of the other. So if one of them may be polarized horizontally, for example, and the other one is polarized vertically. But when you first generate them, they're in neither state. They're in both states. They're in a superposition of states, and you don't know which one is polarized horizontally or vertically. But if you were to intercept one of these photons and put it through a detector and figure out whether it was polarized vertically or horizontally, then that will cause the other photon to collapse from its superposition state and becoming polarized in the other direction. So if you detect that this photon is polarized vertically, that will cause the other photon to become polarized horizontally. And I know that there's something a little bit counterintuitive about that, but that's how it is with quantum mechanics. There's a lot of counterintuitive things. And it would be a much longer video if I tried to explain how this works. But what this means is that if you send this through a fiber optic cable and somebody were to try to intercept these photons, then if they intercept one of these photons, it will cause the other photon to collapse into the other state. And this is something that you can detect and infer by observing the other photon. And so that means that the wiretapper, the would-be wiretapper, would be caught. You would know that he was there. You would realize that he had intercepted this photon. And you could infer that by observing the other photon and what state it had collapsed into. This is sort of the method that physicists have proposed for how to prevent interception, or more accurately, how to detect interception. You can't passively wiretap over a channel that is driven by quantum key distribution, because if you just passively try to intercept the photons, it will disrupt the superposition of states of the other photon, and thus will be detected. So the problem is that there are so many physical limitations of this channel. It has to be a fiber optic cable over, a distance of no greater than 100 kilometers, or it could be lasers between satellites in space. But it's highly unlikely that the wiretapper is going to be able to intercept photons between satellites in space, because he'd have to have another satellite exactly in the path between them, and orbital mechanics makes that very difficult. So that pretty much means that practical use of this is going to be through fiber optic cables. And if you have to have a repeater every 100 kilometers, then those repeaters are physical facilities that you could do a successful wiretap in that facility. And that would sort of defeat the purpose of quantum key distribution. And so for this reason, and also if you try to use it for other physical layers like Wi-Fi or 3G or 4G or 5G or twisted pair copper wire or Ethernet cables or Bluetooth or any kind of physical layer that isn't just a fiber optic cable capable of transporting these very sensitive sort of choreographed photons. Another limitation of this is that you can't send regular internet packets that could be processed by a router and routed, because routers have to inspect the packet header for IP packets. And that means they would have to look at the photons that carry the IP address. And if they do that, that will screw up the superposition of those two, and it will ruin the whole thing. And so that means that while you can send photons through this cable using quantum key distribution techniques, you can't send internet packets that could be processed in the normal way by a router. So that is yet another limitation of this physical channel. And so this means that if you want to carry around a smartphone or any other mobile device and communicate with Wi-Fi or 4G or something like that, then you're going to have to use post-quantum algorithms, as we discussed in our earlier video. And if you're going to have to do that for part of the journey, the part that isn't over a fiber optic cable, well, you really want to do that end to end. And so if you do that, then why do you need quantum key distribution? And so it would be better to just depend entirely on post-quantum algorithms. And so even though the physics is beautiful and elegant, it's something that doesn't solve enough of the problem to be useful, to be generally useful for the internet as a whole. And we depend on the internet as a whole being able to move across all kinds of physical layers. And so the only way to achieve that is with post-quantum algorithms. That's my criticism of it. This is a view shared by every cryptographer that I know. I know a lot of cryptographers, and they all have this opinion. When what you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. And physicists know how to solve this with physics, and so they try to solve it with quantum key distribution, but it doesn't solve the problem broadly enough. And so for that reason, I think that we should divert our efforts to post-quantum algorithms. Now, physicists also object to post-quantum algorithms, saying that, well, what if some other mathematical breakthrough threatens the post-quantum algorithms? But, there's no evidence that that's going to be a problem, because, or at least it's no different from every other encryption algorithm that we've used for many decades. The advanced encryption standard. How do we know somebody won't break that? In fact, maybe they won't even need a quantum computer. Maybe they'll find some mathematical breakthrough in the future that could break the advanced encryption standard, the block cipher that we all use for our, workhorse block cipher. How do we know they won't break a hash algorithm that we depend on? It's happened before, so it could happen again, and it doesn't need a quantum computer necessarily. So whatever confidence that you need to have in your encryption algorithms, whether they're post-quantum or classic algorithms, it kind of builds up over time as you gain experience and you gain confidence in them. And so that's going to be true for the for post-quantum algorithms. And there's no reason to think that they're going to be threatened by Shor's algorithm or some other algorithm on quantum computers. And so that's the remaining objection that I'm aware of against post-quantum algorithms. And I just don't think it applies here. It's no different than the objections that we have to depending on other encryption algorithms for the past 50 years. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. That's pretty much the consensus of all the cryptographers that I talked to about this.